The house was quiet. That kind of silence only an old place like this could hold, thick, settled, almost respectful. I walked barefoot across the pinewood floor, still cool from the night. The boards creaked under my weight, same spot they always had. Sunlight filtered through the shutters just enough to cast soft lines on the hallway walls. I paused at the banister, ran my hand over the worn groove my father's ring had carved into the rail over decades. His study door, still off its hinge, hung crooked like it always had. I'd meant to fix it for years. This place, my place, hadn't changed. Not really. Not since he passed. I kept it standing. Kept it breathing. While others moved on, I stayed. I kept the lights paid, the garden from overgrowing, the windows from warping. Some people inherit property. I inherited responsibility. The kettle clicked off behind me. As I poured hot water over the French press, my phone buzzed on the counter. I almost didn't check it. I wish I hadn't. Subject: Notice of civil action, property dispute. I didn't understand at first. Read it 3 times. Then the name caught my eye, Marceline Vale. My sister. I stared, stunned, at her name on the header of a lawsuit. She was suing me over the house. Over this house. I dropped into the nearest chair, letter still open on my screen. The phrases blurred together: unlawful occupant relinquish property, civil proceedings. Unlawful. As if I was trespassing. As if I was some squatter on the porch I helped repaint every spring. Dad's voice echoed from memory: this house is yours to protect. I'd taken him seriously. Apparently, Marcy had not. I didn't cry. I just stared. And when the silence finally got too loud, I stood up. The study hadn't changed much: oak shelves, cluttered desk, scent of old tobacco and leather-bound books. My hands trembled as I tugged open drawers. The safe in the corner, half covered by a faded Afghan, still sat where he left it. I knelt beside it, turned the dial. Nothing. The key was gone. In the chaos of paper, I found receipts, mortgage payoffs, old tax returns, but no will. I knew it had existed. I remembered Dad saying something after the hospital. I remembered something else, too. The day of the funeral. Mom had gone into this room when no one was looking. She came out with a red folder she never explained. I found her on the back porch, watering the succulents she never seemed to care about before. "Did you ever see Dad's will?" I asked, quietly. She didn't flinch. Didn't look at me. "It's best not to dwell on the past," she said, voice clipped. "What's done is done." I stood there, letting the weight of that dodge settle in. My own mother. Hiding something? Protecting who? That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, I heard laughter, 2 familiar voices from the dining room. I froze. Marcy. She was here. No one told me. I walked in, and they both looked up, Mom mid-sip of wine, Marcy with a smirk that never reached her eyes. "Oh." Marcy blinked. "You're home early." I wasn't. But I let it go. She was dressed for dinner, casual but calculated. Mom poured her another glass like they were old friends catching up. I wasn't offered one. We ate. Or they did. I mostly moved food around my plate. "Still living here?" Marcy asked, tilting her head. "Must be. Comforting. Familiar walls and all." I stared at her. "You mean the house you're trying to sue out from under me?" She just smiled. It's not personal. Everything about her tone was personal. Family doesn't need to raise their voice to hurt you, I thought bitterly. They just pretend you're invisible. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the halls like a ghost, ending up in the den where old photographs lined the walls. One in particular, Dad and I on the porch, me about 8, him crouched beside me, caught my attention. I reached for it. Something behind the photo shifted. I pulled it from the frame and found a folded paper tucked behind the matting. My breath caught. Trust Revision, 2019. It wasn't the full will, but it was something. It had my name on it. My name. His signature. My hands shook, not from fear this time, but from something close to hope. Maybe he had tried to protect me. I didn't know it yet, but that faded piece of paper would become my first weapon in a war I hadn't asked to fight. The attic always smelled like dust and old ambition. I climbed the creaking ladder with a flashlight in one hand and a garbage bag in the other. Up there, the world felt paused, like time had stacked itself neatly into cardboard boxes and yellow plastic bins. I opened one marked SMAS 2009 and found an old stocking with my name stitched in fading red thread. Beneath it, buried among wrapping paper and broken ornaments, I found a manila envelope. Inside, receipts, handwritten grocery lists, and near the bottom, folded with care, a letter. It was dated June 2020. Dad's handwriting was unmistakable. Careful, deliberate. As if he knew someone would be reading it long after he was gone. He wrote, "If something happens, I want Illyria to have what's already hers. She's earned it, by staying, by caring. This place is her legacy, not a burden. No signature. No notary. Just ink on paper." Legally, it meant next to nothing. Emotionally, it meant everything. My chest tightened as I read it again. Maybe I wasn't crazy for believing he wanted me to keep the house. By late afternoon, I was parked outside a narrow brick building downtown. The sign above the door said Covell and Hart, Property and Estate Law. Inside, a woman behind the desk offered a tired smile and sweet tea in a paper cup. Her accent was soft Carolina, the kind that wrapped around you like a porch swing on a summer night. I handed over the envelope. Ben Covell came out 10 minutes later, early 50s, military haircut, iron shirt that didn't try too hard. His handshake was firm, but his eyes studied me like a puzzle he hadn't solved yet. He read the letter in silence. "This won't hold up in court by itself," he said finally. "But it tells a story. Judges listen to stories when they feel real." I asked what came next. He told me to start looking for witnesses. Anyone who might have heard him say something. Anything that confirms he intended to revise the will. Then he leaned back, tapping the paper with one thick finger. "But if your sister's sitting on the official will and it contradicts this, you're in for a fight. A real one." I nodded. He handed me a checklist scribbled on legal pad. It felt like instructions for a war I didn't want, but couldn't walk away from. Back home, I opened the county's online property database. My stomach dropped. 2 months ago, the house had been refinanced, through a trust. Marcy's name was on it. So was my mother's. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even been asked. It wasn't just a legal move. It was personal. And it had been planned. Quietly. Carefully. I reread the entry 3 times. Then stared at the screen, jaw clenched. It wasn't just that they hadn't told me. It was that they acted like I didn't exist. I leaned back, trying to remember what was happening 2 months ago. There was a night, Marcy had canceled a family dinner. Said mom wasn't feeling well. But now I remembered a neighbor saying they'd seen the two of them downtown, dressed up, smiling. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. But maybe that was the night they signed the trust papers. I walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer where Mom kept copies of everything, tax returns, expired coupons, church bulletins. The copy of the house deed was always there. It was gone. I closed the drawer slowly. The calm that settled over me wasn't peace. It was focus. A kind of steel. Later that evening, needing air more than groceries, I walked to the small market 2 blocks down. I nearly didn't notice her at first, Mrs. Gibbons, our old housekeeper. Bent slightly with age, but her voice still sharp as ever. She spotted me before I could wave. "Oh honey," she said, hugging me tight, "I've been meaning to call." We talked near the produce aisle, between the oranges and the overpriced kale. Then she leaned in, lowering her voice. "I was there, you know. Few months before your daddy passed. Him and Marcy had a row, a big one." I froze. "What about?" He told her plain, "This house goes to your sister. You had your chance with the condo." Clear as day. I blinked. "You'd be willing to say that legally?" She looked me dead in the eye. "For your daddy?" I'd shout it from the courthouse steps. For the first time in days, I exhaled fully. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I dialed Ben Covell's number, heart steady. "We've got a potential witness," I told him. And I meant it. The rain started mid-morning, not just a drizzle, but a downpour that pounded the windows like it had something to say. Thunder followed, low and drawn out, vibrating through the floorboards. That sound used to quiet my father. Now, it did the same to me. I found myself sitting by the front window with a blanket I didn't remember pulling over my shoulders. My coffee had gone cold. Next to me on the table, an old journal peeked out from under a stack of mail. I hadn't opened it since the week we buried Dad. The cover was stiff from dust. Pages yellowed, curled slightly at the edges. I flipped through half-heartedly until one entry stopped me cold. The date was 3 weeks before Dad passed. My handwriting was rushed, almost angry. Heard Dad and Marcy arguing again. Door cracked open just enough. He was furious. Said something like, "Illyria gets the house, not you, and I'll make that clear in writing." Said Marcy was manipulating Mom. Said he was done being guilt. My throat tightened. I hadn't let myself think about that night in years. It was easier to chalk it up to grief, stress. But I remembered the tone in his voice now, not angry, not cruel. Just final. Like he was drawing a line he couldn't undraw. I had pushed that memory away. Told myself it wasn't my place. That grown folks argue. But now I saw it for what it was, a warning, a promise, a wedge. I stood, paced slowly around the living room, connecting dots I hadn't dared look at before. The trust being refinanced. The documents disappearing. Marcy's sudden smiles. Mom's silent cooperation. None of this was an accident. Dad wasn't just old-fashioned or vague about legal things. He'd seen this coming. Maybe not every move, but the shape of it. And I'd let it all stay buried. I was still gripping the journal when the phone buzzed. "Illyria," Ben's voice came steady but low, "I've been hearing whispers. Marcy might be preparing to file a cease and desist. Claims of harassment tied to the trust." I didn't respond right away. She's not suing, not yet, he continued. But she's letting you know she's watching. She wants you nervous. Careful how you move. I've done nothing wrong, I said. That won't stop a letter. Keep everything documented. Every call, every word. He paused. Let her move first. Don't flinch. I hung up and stood still for a long time. No music. No lights. Just the sound of rain. That night, after dinner and dishes, I put on Dad's old field jacket and took a walk downtown. The square was quiet, a few storefronts lit, most dark. The breeze smelled like wet brick and magnolia. I remembered something Dad once told me after I lost a high school debate. Sometimes power is letting them think they've won right until they haven't. I stopped under the awning of the old post office, pulled out my phone, and began writing a list. Dates. Documents. People present. Conversations remembered. I added Mrs. Gibbons, circled her name. I wrote letter, attic underlined twice. I noted the canceled dinner, and the neighbor's comment. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was building a case. Back home, I found Mom in the den folding laundry. Her TV was on but low. I sat down across from her. Calm. Not cold. Mom, I started, did Dad ever mention changing his will? She didn't look up. He talked about a lot of things, she said, folding a hand towel a little too neatly. But did he ever say he planned to leave the house to me? She finally met my eyes. There was a flicker, not guilt exactly. More like recognition. He loved both of you, she said. That's not what I asked. Silence. Then, Marcy, she was struggling, Illyria. And your father, well, he could be stubborn. So he did plan to change it. She didn't answer. Just turned back to the laundry. But that pause, that silence, it confirmed everything I needed to know. I stood. My voice steady. Protecting Marcy at my expense doesn't make you a good mother. It makes you an accomplice. She flinched but didn't respond. Back in my room, I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank page. I started typing. My name is Illyria Quinn, and this is what I remember. The late afternoon light fell in slanted lines through the old blinds, making stripes across the kitchen table. I sat with my laptop open, fingers tapping against the ceramic mug I hadn't refilled in hours. Every move they'd made, every date, every whispered phone call, every canceled dinner, was listed on the screen in front of me. I remembered what Dad used to say when he wanted me to stop overreacting: you don't win by shouting. You win by showing up. So that's what I was doing. Showing up. I made columns. Date, action, witness, risk, opportunity. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Marcy's refinance of the trust. The timing of Mom's sudden shifts in attitude. The silence. And then the silence broken in small ways, like breadcrumbs I hadn't realized were meant for me. Then my phone buzzed. Alert, county clerk filing notification. I opened it. My stomach flipped. Marcy had filed paperwork to list the property as a short-term rental. My home, the one she was accusing me of unlawfully occupying, was being prepped to host vacationers for profit. Without my consent. Without even pretending to notify me. I stood up from the table so fast the chair scraped the floor. They're turning our home into a business, I said out loud, not caring there was no one there to hear it. And hiding the profits. I dialed Ben. They're bleeding the house dry, I said as soon as he picked up. He sighed. Then we're dealing with both fraud and family. That makes it messier, but it also gives us more leverage. He told me to document everything. Screenshots, filings, timestamps. If it touches money, it's evidence. I hung up and took a breath. The air felt heavier. I opened the screen door, stepped out, then closed it quietly behind me. Next morning, I drove to see Mrs. Gibbons. The retirement home had a faint scent of lemon polish and old paperbacks. She was sitting near the window in a recliner, glasses slipping down her nose. When I told her what was happening, she didn't act surprised. Just tired. After a long pause, she reached beside her chair and pulled out a folded, slightly crumpled piece of paper. A receipt. Your sister reimbursed your mother for this, she said softly. Some estate lawyer, I remember, because Rosamund said something about cleaning up old messes. That was 2 weeks after the funeral. I held the receipt like it might vanish. She never said more than she needed to, I said. No, she agreed. But you always knew how to listen between her words. I looked her in the eyes. Would you say that, on record? If it came to it? She nodded. If they make me. For your daddy, I would. When I got home, I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car, engine off, watching the evening local news on my phone. And there she was. Marcy. Standing in front of our house. Microphone clipped to her jacket. She spoke with glossy, deliberate sorrow. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I'm trying to protect what our father built, for the family. For future generations. I watched the comments roll in on the news blog. Classic Southern drama. Sister versus sister, again? Someone's lying. I didn't respond. Didn't refresh the page. I just stared at her face on the screen. She was spinning her own truth. Painting me as the one tearing things apart. Fine. Let her. The more she spoke, the more material I had. That night, when it was quiet again, I slipped out the back door and walked the marsh trail behind the house. The moon was high. The grass wet under my boots. Dad's voice echoed in my mind, your enemies shouldn't know your next step, Illyria. They should see the result. I knew what I had to do. Subpoena the receipts. Secure the letter. Line up Ben. Line up Mrs. Gibbons. Let Marcy's campaign build until it couldn't carry its own weight. I whispered it into the wind, more to myself than anyone else. I may move quietly. But I will not be silent. Tomorrow morning, I file motion 27. And when that gavel drops, everything starts. I was halfway through my second coffee when the call came in. A woman from the bank, crisp voice, firm tone, asked if I could verify a document. Her team had flagged it during a routine audit. Did you, at any point, sign a waiver relinquishing claim to the property on Waterford Lane? I blinked. Absolutely not. She paused. That's what we figured. They'd seen a signature that didn't quite match. The system caught the discrepancy. She told me the document had been processed under Marcy's name, with a transfer pending. I asked for a copy immediately and sent it straight to Ben. His reply came fast, this is it. She's overplayed her hand. And just like that, the air shifted. No more guessing games. No more quiet maneuvering. Now, it was war. I drove straight over to Mom's. Marcy's SUV was already there, parked too confidently in the gravel. She was on the porch, sipping sweet tea like it was a calm Sunday afternoon. The same porch where we used to sit, back when things still made sense. I didn't ask how she was. Didn't greet her. Just walked up and said, "You forged my name." She didn't flinch. Didn't look away. Just set her glass down slowly and smirked. "You'll never prove it was me." I stepped closer. "You've committed fraud, Marcy. You've manipulated Mom, violated Dad's trust, and now you've crossed a legal line." The smirk stayed, but her jaw tightened. "You're making this uglier than it has to be. Ugliness was your choice, not mine." We argued, loudly. Words flying like darts, none of them soft. I could see the curtain move behind Mom's window, but she didn't come out. Marcy finally stood and hissed, "You're desperate." I looked her square in the eye. "No, Marcy. I'm done being quiet. And I'm not stepping back again." Then I left. The next morning, I sat across from Ben in his office. The room smelled like polished wood and old books, the kind of space that knew how to keep secrets. Ben had a folder open, papers laid out with precision. He pointed to dates, legal code, strategy. "If we act first," he said, "we file for injunctive relief and request a temporary freeze on trust assets. If the judge denies it, you could lose everything. Not just the house, you might be on the hook for damages." I stared at the ceiling for a second, then back at him. "The cost of silence is worse." He nodded. "No convincing needed." That evening, I found an envelope on the floor just inside my door. No postage. Just my name in Mom's handwriting. Inside was a letter. Short. Hesitant. I stayed silent because I thought peace was more important than fairness. Maybe I was wrong. She didn't name Marcy outright. Didn't admit to anything specific. But there were lines, carefully written, like she was trying to apologize without truly stepping out of line. She knew more. Had known more. And had said nothing. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in my desk drawer. It wouldn't hold up in court. But it cracked something between them. A small crack, but it was there. That night, I sat at the kitchen table again and recorded a short video. "This isn't just about a house," I said into the camera. "This is about honoring someone's last wishes. And standing up to the kind of quiet manipulation that tears families apart." I posted it to Facebook. Didn't expect much. But it spread faster than I thought. Old friends. Neighbors. Former classmates I hadn't heard from in years. Marcy responded, vague as ever. Something about misinformation and unnecessary conflict. But the tone had shifted. People weren't so sure anymore. The cracks in her image were starting to show. Ben called the next morning. "We've been served," he said. "Trial date is set." I arrived home just after noon. The sun was high and I parked in the familiar driveway. I unlocked the door and found a white envelope taped to it, bold against the brick. I slid inside, flipped it open, and my heart stopped for a moment. The document was a court summons. Filed under my name. With a motion to remove me from the house I've lived in for years. They claimed I was an illegal occupier, that I had overstayed my welcome, and accused me of emotional instability dragging on the estate. My mind raced. I called Ben right away. "What do we do?" I asked. He sounded calm but firm. "They're shifting the battleground. Evicting you before trial. That's not just strategy, it's a show of force." And it hit me, this wasn't just property anymore. It was power. Early the next day I sat in court gallery, watching Marcy's lawyer rise. He introduced a woman I barely recognized, Colleen, someone I once helped at a nonprofit years ago. She claimed I'd manipulated her for personal gain, twisted situations. I remember holding her hand when she cried after her divorce, offering advice, a shoulder. Now she delivered testimony like she was rehearsed. Ben leaned in and whispered, "They're attacking your character, not just the assets." My stomach clenched. I realized I wasn't just defending a house, I was defending who I was. When Colleen's words echoed in my head later, guilt hit. Not about truth, but about how slow I'd been to defend it. Marcy wasn't playing fair. She'd rewritten the narrative while I stayed silent. And now the room felt smaller. Her presence shrank mine. I met Blythe for coffee that afternoon, in a place with worn hardwood floors and mismatched chairs. I told her I felt like I was losing ground, not on paper, but in people's minds. Why does it hurt more that she's winning the story than the house itself? I asked her. She stirred her tea and said quietly, because the story becomes the truth for everyone else. I nodded, eyes stinging. She helped me map options, go public, get a psychological evaluation, expose her. I realized I wasn't going to sit back anymore. I needed to shift from defense to offense. Later at home, I pulled out Dad's flannel shirt, the one he wore in the video he made before he passed. I'd kept it folded in the drawer. I took it out, inhaled the faint scent of him, and slipped it on. It felt strange, heavy, like armor. I remembered what he'd said to both of us, "I trust you, Illyria. I trust you, too, Marcy. But you both are executors." I thought I'd kept his legacy intact. But standing there in his shirt, I knew I was stepping into his fight. I opened my leather journal and wrote down every lie I could remember her telling. Line by line. The refinance. The missing deed. The locked safe. The canceled dinner. Mrs. Gibbons' receipt. These weren't memories anymore, they were evidence. I referenced the shirt quietly, thinking, this isn't mourning. This is strategy. Ben called the next morning. I answered with coffee in hand, standing by the window. "We've drafted the countersuit," he said. "Defamation, psychological harassment, once we file, we're flipping the board." "So we're taking back control," I said. My voice was steadier than I anticipated. "Yes. You're not just defending now, you're asserting." I only nodded. I pulled the shirt closer. The fight would be long. They could still paint me as unstable or unhinged. But I'd armored up. I wasn't hiding anymore. The dawn felt new that morning. The marsh behind the house glowed pale in the early light. I walked outside, steps firm, fists relaxed. I turned back once, looked at the house, and thought they'd land the first blow. They were wrong. I climbed the marble steps of the courthouse just as the sun broke through the clouds. My chest felt heavy but steady. The riverfront house, the one that had been my life after Dad died, floated in my mind's eye as I walked through the doors. The lobby was hushed. Law books lined shelves like sentinels. Suits moved in measured steps, not families. Not my world. Yet here I was. I spotted Marcy across the aisle. Her posture was relaxed, a postcard pose of calm confidence. For the first time, I felt her sight on me as if she knew she already owned everything. I sat down, took off my coat, and tried to steady my nerves. This was the moment all the planning led to. The opening statements, the midnight documents, the receipts and phone calls, it all converged now. I closed my eyes for a second and heard Dad's quiet voice, "Show up, even when they don't expect you." When the judge entered, the room exhaled. Silence settled like folding wings. My heart thudded in a rhythm I recognized, classic fear, now tempered with resolve. I met Marcy's gaze. Her lips curved subtly. A challenge. Ben stood and delivered his opening statement. "My client, Ms. Illyria Quinn, has been the true steward of the estate from the day Mr. Thad Quinn Carlyle fell ill." The tone was crisp. He laid out the packet of files, the trust revision letter, witness lists, the timeline I had fashioned in the kitchen late at night. He nodded toward Mrs. Gibbons's affidavit waiting to be sworn. I watched Marcy lean forward, her eyebrows rose just a hair. That small motion carried a signal, she was nervous. The gallery shifted. This was no longer a quiet family quarrel. This was a fight for legacy. I sat taller. The strategy one had built, the dust I had sifted, the late-night walks through the marsh, all of it mattered now. Then Marcy's attorney rose. He played a voicemail recording, allegedly in my voice, consenting to relinquish the house. My stomach sank like a stone dropped in dark water. I recognized the tone but not the script. Ben jumped to his feet and objected, asking for a digital forensics expert. I held my breath. They were not only attacking the house, they were attacking my character. My reputation. Colleen, the woman I once mentored, sat poised, testimony ready. She called me by a childhood nickname I had left behind. It hit me hard. I wasn't merely on trial for ownership anymore. I was on trial for my life's narrative. Suddenly, I saw through Marcy's calm, her story was built on rewriting mine. My hands clenched under the table. Enough. Then the door at the back of the courtroom swung open, and in walked Gideon Hale. He carried a sealed envelope with Dad's handwriting visible through the manila tab, "Illyria, Guardian." Every head turned. Even Marcy's face went white. Gideon walked to the witness stand, cleared his throat, and testified about the night he heard Dad saying the house would belong to me, not because of favoritism but because of my commitment, my presence, my refusal to walk away. The hush in the room was thick, charged. Marcy's lawyer froze mid-question. The judge leaned forward. I didn't gasp. I simply felt the weight lift. I sat back and let the moment wash over me, vindication, quiet and absolute. The man who had built the home trusted me. Not her. After the hearing, I stepped out into the warm Charleston air. The sun was lower now, soft gold on brick and river. Marcy slipped away without a word. Mrs. Gibbons came up beside me and gave a gentle hug. I heard a reporter's mic click behind us. I didn't care. A shift had happened. The power didn't roar. It whispered, steady. I inhaled, felt the breeze from the Ashley River rustle my hair. This is a beginning, I told myself. The war wasn't finished. But I had made my stand. I woke when the first light filtered through the sheer curtains, the air unusually still around the house. I slipped downstairs quietly, no creak of floorboards, just the hum of early morning. In the garden behind the house Dad once sat with his coffee, now the hydrangeas he planted bloomed quietly. I stood there, barefoot on dew-cooled stone, already running through every contradiction Marcy's side had thrown at us in court. The house, the title, the dinner cancellations, the missing safe key, all of it aligned in my mind. Dad's words echoed, "Grace under pressure is louder than rage and chaos." I breathed in that quiet and held it tightly. It felt weighty, not because the fight was near its end, but because it might finally be seen. When the hearing resumed mid-morning, I walked into the courtroom and spotted Marcy's team with renewed energy. The moment spun on a new axis. They introduced a neurologist who claimed our father was mentally unfit when he signed the trust documents. He had never met Dad, only examined second-hand records and observed patterns of cognitive decline. The judge glanced at Ben and back at Marcy, frowning beneath his brow. Ben stood and objected sharply, no direct assessment, no meeting, just conjecture. I watched Marcy's face, calm in repose, but the set of her shoulders told another story. She'd weaponized sympathy, twisted Dad's illness into her strategy to justify her claim. It wasn't just sly, it was cruel. And in that moment I felt rage, suppressed, steady, cold. This wasn't about property. It was about rewriting our history. My hands clenched under the desk, I forced myself to breathe. A few hours later, I found myself with Blythe in our usual cafe, a place with worn chairs, mismatched tables, and the smell of fresh ground coffee. I barely touched my drink. Why does it hurt more that she's winning the narrative than the house itself? I asked. Blythe looked me in the eye and said, because the story becomes what everyone else remembers. I felt the weight of truth in her words. It struck me how long I'd been quieter than the echoes. We talked about options: go public, request a psychological evaluation, lay bare her manipulation. I realized I was done defending. I was going to expose. The fog around me shifted into clarity. It wasn't power to stay silent. It was power to act. Later that day, I returned to the house carrying Dad's old flannel shirt, the one he wore in his final video message. I had folded it away, respectful and used. Tonight I pulled it on like armor. It smelled like cedar chips and winter fires, his scent, his presence. I sat in the study, opened my journal, and began my truth log: the refinance filing, the house title change, Mrs. Gibbons' receipt, Mom's odd silence, the canceled dinner. I typed each detail slowly, methodically. The shirt reminded me Dad trusted both of us equally. Trust was never about favoritism, but about accountability. I wasn't mourning his passing anymore. I was honoring him by insisting on the truth. The calm I felt wasn't relief, it was readiness. In the late evening, the hallway echoed with voices. Outside the courthouse, Marcy stopped me by the elevator. "You think this is over?" she asked, tone even. "It ended the day you decided to erase him to win," I replied. My voice didn't tremble. She laughed, low and a little brittle. "You'll regret this." We stood there a moment longer. I turned away before she could respond. Not out of fear, but because final power isn't in the response, it's in leaving the conversation behind. Back at the house, I lit the fireplace. The last note Dad wrote to both of us sat on the mantel. I read it alone: "Stay true. Let love guide you, not fear." I let the flames rise and settled into the quiet. Ahead lay the verdict. But for the first time, I wasn't waiting in dread. I was poised. I walked into the courthouse alone that morning. No hand to hold, no crowd. Just the click of my heels echoing against marble and the sound of my own breath. Ben was already seated when I arrived, reviewing his notes like he hadn't done it 100 times already. I didn't sit right away. I stood still, looking around that room where so much had shifted. It felt different today, lighter, but not easy. The judge entered with a quiet nod, took his seat, and began reading the decision. My fingers curled into my palm as he spoke. The will would stand as written. My father's trust revisions, his words, his wishes, they held. I didn't look at Marcy until I heard the verdict in full. When I finally did, she wasn't smiling. She wasn't scowling either. Just still. Her posture drooped, not in defeat, but in a kind of surrender that looked more like exhaustion than anything else. Ben leaned over. "You did it," he whispered. I didn't answer right away. I just exhaled. That breath, I didn't realize how long I'd been holding it. Months? Maybe longer. Thank you, I said. And I meant it, not for the win, but for standing beside me when so many turned away. The hallway outside court had cleared out by the time I stepped through. I thought she might avoid me, but she didn't. Marcy walked straight over. No entourage. No glare. Just her. You know, she started, her voice low, Dad always loved you more. I didn't react, not immediately. Then I said, no. He just trusted who showed up. She didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a worn photograph, us as kids, sitting on Dad's lap. I remembered that day. He tried to build a kite, and we ended up tangled in string, laughing until we cried. We were supposed to be family, she said, staring down at the picture. We still are, I told her. But that takes choice. Every day. She nodded once. Not in agreement, just acknowledgement. Then she walked off, slow, like she wasn't sure what to do with herself now that there was no one left to fight. Back at the house, I didn't go straight to work. I wandered. Room by room, memory by memory. I touched the kitchen counter where Dad used to leave his half-finished crossword puzzles. The dent in the staircase from when I fell running down with socks on. His reading chair, still there, threadbare, stubborn. I began sorting through his books. Some for donation. Some to keep. Under the bench by the piano, I found a journal. His. Inside, near the back, a small note was tucked between the pages. His handwriting was unmistakable. If the fight for the house breaks you, it was never about love. If it sets you free, then it always was. I didn't make it to the couch. I sat down right there, on the floor. Letting the words in. Letting the grief out. It wasn't pain that made the tears fall. It was release. A few days passed. The air shifted. I met with Blythe again. We made plans to start a monthly support group at the house. Something for families going through care decisions, inheritance stress, grief. Dad would have liked that. He believed in action, not speeches. One neighbor dropped off a cake. For keeping the house in the right hands, she said. I didn't smile, but I thanked her. I turned down interview requests. Didn't want my face next to headlines like Family Feud over estate ends in court. I wasn't interested in being that woman. Instead, I signed papers to designate part of the house for community use, twice a month, open doors, open ears. It wasn't about what I owned anymore. It was about honoring what built me. The next Sunday, I drove out to Dad's gravesite. The air was crisp, the grass still damp from early morning dew. I brought fresh flowers. And a copy of the verdict. I knelt, placed the paper under a small stone at the base of his marker, and whispered, "You were right." But I had to be strong to make it right. A soft wind moved through the trees, brushing my cheek on the way by. It didn't feel like just weather. It felt like blessing. On the drive back, I took the long way home. Window down, elbow resting on the door, no music, just the sound of tires on pavement and my own breath, this time steady. The house waited, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt held. And me? I wasn't the same woman who walked into that courtroom. I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. I was whole. Finally.